5 scores! Rick Vaughn.
We've decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick Vaughn, Gary Madden.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 105 of the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan. Joining me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, how are we keeping?
Not too bad, Michael. Just enjoying this lovely cold weather. Well, actually, it's a little bit warmer today. It's not bad. The sun's out, so can't complain.
Well, our guest today is back for a second time. He was so good the first time, we had him back a second time. And, just to review a little bit, drafted by Buffalo Sabres in 1992, enjoyed a 15-year pro career, became one of the all-time agitators in the NHL, and loved every minute of it, as you'll soon hear. As the spokesman for the popular gambling site Bet99, has written a very funny book titled Unfiltered. Please welcome back Matthew Barnaby. Barney, thanks for joining us again. How's it going?
Good. Technical issues on my end. Sorry about that, boys. I'm 50 years old. You'd think I'd know how to either get into a studio by now or turn up the mic, but thanks for having me on again.
So how's the book tour going?
When you get older, you forget those things, Barney.
Well, Squid, I go through that with Squid every day, for crying out loud.
Hey,
so
usually I have my wife set everything up. I full disclosure, usually she puts the earphones on, checks the mic, everything, and I just talk. And that's what I like to do. I like to talk, but anything technical is definitely not up my alley.
Well, that goes double for both of us. That's why we have Jack and Glenn Dreyfus to help us out, because we have big issues, Barney. So how's the book tour going?
It's great. A little sidelined. I heard Rick talking on the open about the weather getting cold, and sometimes weather plays into that. Obviously, us living in Canada. I was in Orlando with my son for a couple of weeks, got stuck there for 5 extra days trying to get to Buffalo for the launch through a hurricane. It wasn't anything bad at all, but it was high winds and some rain. So I was delayed getting there. Supposed to be in Toronto last weekend, but the snowfall carried through from Buffalo. I think everyone's seen the news the last week and everything that went on in Buffalo. With about 6 feet of snow coming down. That came down to the 401 a little bit with Belleville and Kingston, and I didn't want to chance it, so we'll reschedule that. But for the events that I have done in Buffalo, it was absolutely awesome. Love seeing the fans, love seeing people finally getting through the book and enjoying the stories as much as I saw write them, or as much as I enjoyed writing them. So it's been a rough start in the fact that weather's played part of it. But in the end, we're off and running and having fun with it.
Now, are you coming to Toronto?
How ironic is that, Barney, that you and my book came out about 2 months before the pandemic, so I didn't get to go anywhere, and you got snow problems.
Well, hey, at least in the pandemic, people couldn't go out. That's a great way to increase sales. You're probably to blame. You're probably to blame for bringing it over from China. You're like, I got a book out. I need a pandemic to keep everyone indoors with nothing to do. So we're going to sell it. And the plan is to come back to Toronto. We're working on a few different things. Going to do a podcast at Bottom Line. Going to do a signing there and trying to make it, when you go to one place, economically, it just makes sense to do 4 or 5 different signings in different venues, whether it's an OHL rink, certain different things along the way, watch parties. So definitely coming to Toronto, just finalizing some dates as we speak.
Well, one of the things I want to ask you is when you're doing some of your signings, what are some of, now it's early, but so this question should probably be asked of you in a couple months, but what are some of the strangest or some of the funniest things fans have said to you so far in meeting you and signing the book?
Yeah, I think it's just reminiscing, with Rick, and anytime he does an event, I'm sure it's the big games that he have or players that you enjoyed playing with, times, biggest games, your favorite memories. They always go back to those, and those are certainly in the book. Everyone, brings back the fact, hat trick on Mother's Day. I had one hat trick. It's not like they say, hey, remember the hat trick? And I had to go through the mental Rolodex and say, oh, which one of the 10? There was one. So it's pretty teed up for me on that side. They'll ask about Gar Snow fighting a goalie. And then it's literally, about stories within the book now. And people were able to get it on Amazon. So they're able to, ask about certain things. I shit my pants on the road in Chicago one night, a night out with Dennis Rodman. I can't remember if we talked about it the first time I was on. People ask about that. Yeah. Rob Ray kissing a transvestite a couple nights earlier in Chicago. So yeah, those are the stories and just other stories just along the way. It's stuff that they're going to read that doesn't come up in everyday conversation in mainstream media. It's more the funny side of things rather than the mainstream side of it, like we do in podcasts.
Yeah.
Well,
Squid?
At the beginning of the book, Barney, just to start things off, you talk about your father who left when you were obviously very, very young. Your brother, 14 years older than you. You never reached out to find out who your father was or anything. Did your brother kind of take over that father role for you?
Absolutely. And, the question always comes up where I pose it. I haven't thought about it. And listen, we all have psychologists when we play in the NHL to help you when you go through streaks or things that help along the way. And I've sat down with especially the one in New York and they asked me the question. I just said, you know what, why didn't you ever reach out? And I was like, I never missed it. I had a loving grandmother. I had a loving mother. I had a great brother that was, a lot of years older than me and really took that role, like you asked, Squid. And I think that's really important. Is it better to have, or is it better not to know your dad or, to know your dad and have a shitty dad? Well, I never knew my dad, so I never missed it. I'd rather never have known my dad and never have missed it really than have a dad that was shitty or beat me. So that's, I find myself, when I look back at my childhood, I didn't miss anything. I had a loving family that gave me a chance, and my brother really did take on that father role.
Well, and plus the fact you immersed yourself in sports so much that you were not distracted by anything else except playing sports.
Yeah, and I was having a beer the other day, just at the local watering hole, watching the Leafs game. And someone was asking me, like you played hockey and then you played soccer. I played hockey, soccer, baseball all year round. I played hockey all year round and absolutely loved it. Played baseball and soccer, but I would go from one to the other. It's probably why I never tried drugs, never got into parties. Either was working out or playing one of the different sports. So I never really got into trouble because there was never time. When I came home, man, it was time to hit the hay and get ready to do it all over again the next day.
Yeah,
I did want to ask you.
Those were the good old days, though, weren't they, Barney? Where you got up and you went to the ballpark, then you went to the soccer field, and then in the wintertime you're playing hockey every day. And it was just the life of a kid playing sports is just unbelievable, really. Yeah,
you learn so many lessons, and what I should have learned is I shouldn't have stopped playing baseball and soccer and football and. When I turned 40, man, that's where I got into my trouble. I should have just kept on playing youth sports. I should have been like that movie. How old is he? He is 12. I would have been the 45-year-old playing with the 12-year-olds on the ball diamond. That might have been a little creepier than the trouble I got into, though.
A couple here for you, Barney. Like, first off, the idea of the book, it almost sounds stupid to be asking this, with anybody listening to our first podcast, the stories you have, you're natural to write a book and just the way you tell a story. But you also lined up with a friend of mine, an outstanding writer by the name of Kevin Shea. And I interviewed him on the radio last week. I hosted on a show, and I said to him, I got to ask you honestly, Matthew Barnaby, like you being the bleeding blue Maple Leaf fan that you are, and what he did to our team over all the years, I would have suspected you would have been the last guy chosen to write that book. But he told a really nice story about you and saying that, Mike, I honestly did think that. He said, but when you asked him to come to the Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer as a participant, he just said to me, he said, the way you just he was so impressed with the way you're so selfless in your act of giving back and making sure everybody had a great time. He did a complete 180 on you.
Yeah, he really was. I didn't know Kevin very well, being from Buffalo. I didn't read a lot of the Buffalo stuff. This is the 20th book he's wrote, and anyone that would know us, we are the complete opposite human beings in this world. I am truly unfiltered, and he's I don't want to say guarded, that's not the right word, but he's prim and proper. He's a very good, just respectful man, very well written, just chooses his words very carefully, but he's a great guy. And that's what I learned. And when I set out to do this, that's I was taking my words. I wanted someone to be able to put that on paper, and having met him and then got to know him. It didn't matter if he was a Leafs fan, a Sabres fan, a Philadelphia or Flyer fan, as long as he was able to portray my words onto a piece of paper. I wanted someone that I was able and felt comfortable with, and was able to do that. There might have been some uncomfortable times, and we've actually never discussed that part of it, because some of the verbiage in there is locker room banter. And, that's not Kevin's demeanor in any which way. It is mine, but I was very steadfast on making sure that was the verbiage that was in there, and stuff that I said to people on the ice, that was the exact same verbiage that had to be in there, or it wasn't going to portray what I did on a daily basis. Is that me on a regular basis in my everyday life? Is that my language that I use? No. But there's words that we use and actions that we use when we play in the National Hockey League to gain an advantage or an edge over our opponents, and making a long-winded answer to finish it off. Kevin was the perfect guy, and he really took everything I said, and I reread everything after it went to paper. And if we had any questions or I had any doubts, we would go through that whole chapter again. So it was a gratifying experience, and I couldn't have chosen a better guy to do it with.
Amen.
Yeah, that's a pretty important thing. I think that I had Scotty Morrison, who I'd known for like 25, 30 years. And I think that's very important, that the person that's writing your book understands you and understands what you want to get out there. And he was fantastic at writing my book as well. And he made the process a whole lot easier for me.
I was writing one fucking book, boys. One book, never again. It's a long process.
Yes. Well, all three of us have all done it. Now, I got questions. I'm going to put you both in the panel right now. Ask you both these questions. First off, starting with you, Barney, the biggest challenge to get started, and then I'll hear from you, Squid.
Wow. Organizing your thoughts. Organizing chronologically how you want the book to portray yourself, and then organizing your thoughts. There's to me, the most important was when I sat down to write it. There's so many stories you tell, and there's so many that you forget. So what I did was write every team down, and I went through the cities. I went through every team, Anaheim, and Buffalo, and Boston, and then Carolina. I tried to remember every story that made sense. You don't fit them all in, but I wanted to go and not make sure I didn't forget anything. So organizing those thoughts, first of all, you have to decide how you want to be portrayed. And I wanted to be honest. Listen, I've done a lot of, I think, really cool things, and a lot of things I'm proud of. There's some things that I'm not so proud of. But I think if you're truly going to do an autobiography and a story about yourself, you really have to be honest. And there's some things that I don't want to say they embarrass me, because the hardest thing in the whole thing was embarrassing my kids on some of the things that happened without. But organizing your thoughts, 75,000 words is a lot of words, and you need to dig deep, and you need to be honest to yourself. So for a guy that only has his grade 11 and a half, 75,000 words is a lot of words.
Squid, you?
Yeah, I think I'd have to say that was probably the toughest thing. Well, first of all, remembering a lot of the things that happened, and also dealing with my family, with my brothers and my sister, because, the first part of the book is not really flattering to what was going on in my household when I was a kid. And they read the first chapter and they go, well, this is not very good it doesn't say good things about mom and dad. I said, yes, it does. I said, but that was the way they lived, and that was the way they were. They invited everybody into the house, no matter who they were. So, getting through that was probably the toughest thing for me.
And how about you, Barney? Like the same thing. Did you have to talk it over with your family? Because let's face it, it's one thing to tell funny locker room stories and, stories in the bar and all that. But when you have to peel back the layers to be completely honest with your audience, because they're too sophisticated, you got to tell some stories you just suggested and maybe you're not so proud of.
Yeah, I did not. The only person that was with me every day was my wife here. And I'd have a notebook and sometimes we do like conversations once a week. I say me and Kevin would get on and discuss the next chapter, but then on my own, I would also go back and write a chapter that was important to me. So, when we were talking about childhood, a lot of those I just wrote notes, and I want to do a thing because I have notes on all different kinds of papers that are just kind of pieced together, and I go back through them. But she was the only one that I'd have her read the sheets as we were going through. And then if I was like, this is a chapter I really want that I did, I'd send it off to Kevin. And when I say really go through it with a fine tooth comb, he had a lot of work to do in recreating the grammar and the spelling, I'm sure. But no, I didn't check with my family. I'd say the only, when I wrote a kind of the tribute and said thank you to my brother, to my mother, my kids, my ex-wife, put in there. I did let my kids see it because it's probably, when I look back, I don't want to say it's a legacy because it's a book, but it's something I wanted, what I said about them, for them to know how I was feeling about them in the good, in the bad, in the aftermath of everything. So I'd say besides my wife, the only 2-page thing was a chapter or a page that I call The Bear and the Princess. The bear is my son, that's his nickname, and the princess is my daughter. They got to see that, but that's it.
Well, I was going to say that, on a smaller scale, I've written a book on beer league hockey. Here's my shameless self-plug. And all the money's going to charity, by the way, that we raise for it. But I made a very conscious decision to make it as raw and real as possible. Otherwise, it wouldn't be believable. Same as you talked about the way you spoke and the verbiage you use. And you have to be honest. So I did have my wife go through certain chapters to make sure it wasn't too over the line.
Yeah.
And I had the editor do the same thing and have him say, and Glenn was going through and say, did this cross the line at any time? And is because I have to make it believable, but I don't want to be too outrageous.
Yeah. And when I look at that, and listen, if you're an analyst on TV and certain things you do, or just in general, people can see through that shit. Yes. Like people can see through people that are fake. And, I wanted to tell the stories. I also wanted to be fair. And I wasn't going to, the book isn't about tearing apart marriages. The book isn't about people doing something that might get them in trouble with the law. Like that's not what the book's about. Now, a guy like Dominic Hasek, who I didn't have a great relationship, do I talk in vain with some of the things? Yeah, it's not anything that's going to cause him any dismay or any trouble down the road. But he probably wouldn't be happy to read some of it. But it's the truth, and I wanted to be completely transparent. I wanted to be completely honest to the fans that exactly what I said 20 years ago, I was going to be the exact same. So Rob making out with a girl that was a guy. Listen, it could have happened to me. Mimi was hot. She was really hot. We had a few beers. It could have happened to any one of us. Could some of the stories, some of the guys laugh at, and some of the guys like, why'd you tell that one? It's not going to cause anyone any trouble at home. And that was something that was equally as important. So it's almost like Law and Order. I'm a big Law and Order fan. At the start of Law and Order, for people that are listening, it starts off, some of the places and people may have changed, but these stories are real.
By the way, the
I
Kinks wrote a song called Lola.
I recall that happening to one of my teammates too, Barney. I can't remember who it was or where it was, but I do remember the guys getting all over whoever it was because that happened to him as well. But which for us was pretty funny, really. I mean, when you think about it, it's something that you're going to talk about as a team for weeks and months and years.
Yeah.
So, hey boys, it's like beer league stories. The hangovers come and go, but the stories last forever.
Yeah. I have received several texts along the way going, is this story in there? Is this story in there? Do I have to buy all the books in Thunder Bay, Ontario, so my wife doesn't get a copy.
Now, the foreword was written by two legendary players, and they insisted on being a part of it when Kevin spoke to them. Mark Messier and Eric Lindros. How did that sit with you when you found that out?
It's a pretty humbling moment, right? Like, I grew up watching Mark Messier play in those 80s teams with Gretz and all the great players. And then I was a kid watching these guys play and enamored with what they did. Having the chance to play with Mark for 3 years in New York, be his line mate for a couple of those. And Eric Lindros, there's no man that I hated more than him. And probably no man he hated more in the NHL when I first came in the league and went against Philly every night and then became my roommate. So, to have them be a part of something so special to me, being the icons they are and Hall of Famers, it's pretty special. And when you look at both those forwards, it's not, very nice things were said, but it wasn't bullshit. They're saying, oh my God, he was the best player or this and that. Mark alludes to some of the troubles that I was and tried to be the best teammate and person that I was. So in the end, it was just very humbling that two great players and two great people were kind enough, gracious enough to put their name on a book, because when they put their name associated with something, it means something.
Squid?
Yeah, no, I would have to say that having two guys like that, I mean, and they know you, they played against you, played with you. They know what's going to be in the book, but yet they said, hey, that's Matthew, you know, and we love him, and we're just going to put our names on it. And I think that's great. I mean, and that's one thing about writing a book. I think you did the right thing by not excluding anything, people need to know about your whole journey, not bits and parts of it that are all good.
Yeah.
They need to know about some of the shitty things, some of the not so good things. And that is what makes the book, I think.
Well, for Barney, I'm sure you got to sit back and think it made all those beatings you took worthwhile when you hear two guys like that praise you like that.
I don't know if I would have felt that, though.
Well, let's leading into that, I do want to say in your opening, I want to get into the book now a little bit. So in your opening statement, you end with, and I quote, "People say they're willing to do anything, but are they really?" I think that defines you to a T. I mean, did you arrive at that crossroad? And how when you arrived at that crossroad, how big an influence was your brother and your surroundings in driving you to be like that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be a hockey player more than anything. That's really all I've ever had interest in being. I never really had a backup plan. I would have figured it out. I would have done something. I would have went, if I didn't make it, I would have went to university. I would have been an entrepreneur. I would have figured out something because
or WWE or something like that, Barney.
Yeah, maybe in the lightweight category. But I didn't grow up with money, and I wanted to have money. I didn't live in the hood, and I had a great upbringing, but we didn't have extras. The only vacation I ever had was a hockey tournament. It was great. I never went to Florida until I played the Florida Panthers. I was like, oh, this is fucking cool. It's warm here. I should live here when I'm older. This is really cool. But I remember that junior training camp, and I was the last overall pick, and I go in, I'm confident. I'm a talented player as a kid. You're all really good as a kid. When you get to that next level, you're like, oh my God, okay, there's a lot of other really good players. And now I'm 17, they're 18, 19, 20. They're physically more mature. They're a little faster, a little stronger. Maybe I'm a little better player, but they have the size thing going on. And after a couple of days, I just remember my mom and brother saying, hey, we're excited. We're coming to Quebec City to see you. I was like, they could sense the discouragement in my voice that I don't know if I'm going to make it. Like, you might be wasting your time coming on up. And my brother just said, you got to stand out. And those words really rang home and struck a bell with me in the fact that, okay, what can I do to stand out? Squid was able to score 3 goals. I wasn't able to do that. It came later on in my junior, but I wasn't able to go out, and I was going to be a wow factor that way. And I don't know what happened. Just something hit me and said, start being an agitator, start pissing people off, and start fighting. I was like, who's the biggest fucking guy here? And they're like, that guy, he's 20. I'm like, oh man, all right, let's go. And I just proceeded to fight him as many times as I could. And I had, fortunately, everyone needs someone to believe in them. I don't care what realm, if it's sports, if it's podcasts, if it's an everyday job, you need someone to believe in you to give you a chance. I had someone that appreciated what I was doing, and that was my coach, Alain Cheney. So without him, maybe I make it, maybe I don't. But certainly he gave me an opportunity to be bigger than something that I was.
So I got to ask you about your interview with the Sabres before your draft. I thought that was probably one of the best lines I've ever heard. When John Muckler says, we're 5 minutes into the game and Bob Probert asks you to go, what are you going to do? Well, I would have already asked him 3 minutes into the game. I thought that was like unbelievable. Like, how the hell did you come up with that? Or was it just in your head?
No, just quick-witted. Like, it was a question that you go into interviews, you're going to get asked questions about how you are. And I knew I was undersized. I went into the draft at 160 pounds. I had 476 minutes in penalties that year. So, I'm fighting a lot of the tough guys. So I know one of the questions has to be, about fighting bigger guys. Like you're going to the NHL. It's like going from midget to junior and having to fight. And now you're going to the next level. I'm going to be asked about, will I play the same role at the next level? Because a lot of guys get drafted and they don't do it, because it's harder. The guys are bigger, stronger again, more mature, and just they're men, and they're doing it for a living now. And it just came out. It was just quick. And Larry Carrier was the guy that followed me around and really, scouted me and drafted me that whole year. And to me, his line. So when he asked me that question, it was just like, well, I'm not going to wait for Bob Probert, because my whole junior career for the last 2 years, at the start of the day, I'm the one asking everyone to fight. No one thinks at 148 pounds and 160 pounds. So I'm the one asking. So when he asked the question, it was just like automatic. Well, I'm already going to ask Proby to fight, man. Like, I'm not going to be nervous. And then Larry Carrier looked at him, and the funniest line, he goes, I told you this kid's a fucking different bird, man.
Well, Barney, along those lines, in a Hockey Night in Canada feature in 1998, you know where I'm going with this, called you the most unpopular player in the NHL. Now, for a lot of players, that could be a death sentence for a career. But for you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but I think you, knowing a little we do of you, that you used it as almost an inspiration to drive you, knowing you were doing your job.
Listen, the Sabres, I had an autograph signing at the Amherst rink in Rochester, and I had an autograph signing scheduled for the Sabres, and they called it off last minute. And everyone says, oh my God, you must be so like heartbroken, whatever. I'm like, you can't buy that kind of fucking PR. Like, the book's called Unfiltered, and they won't host it. Like, you can't buy PR like that at the World Cup. The same thing goes for Don Cherry and his quotes there. He called me the most hated man in the NHL. I wanted to be known as the most hated man in the NHL. That's what I aspired every time I got onto the ice. If I was in Toronto or I was in Philadelphia and the fans aren't giving me the finger and throwing beer on me and calling me a motherfucker, well, I'm obviously not doing my job. So I better turn it up a notch.
Yeah.
So that when he said that, it was almost like, this is awesome. Like, I loved Don Cherry growing up. Listen, every time I was and he was more alluding to the fact that I was turtling and drawing people into penalties. And I did that. I watched the guys in the World Cup flail all over the place and trying to draw a penalty. I did that in the NHL. And if we got it, I'd suck guys into penalties and whatever it may be, and we'd score on the power play, hopefully. Or McGillney would go out, LaFontaine would go out, Lindros would go out, Sakic, whoever it may be. The difference is I was willing to fight too. I led the NHL in fights 2 years, and it wasn't like I was never willing to fight like a Sean Avery or guys that just wouldn't do it. They'd just be rats. I was a rat, but I was also willing to fight. And I think that's the part that I wanted out there in the final. I had no problem being a rat, but Don Cherry, I love you. You're an icon as well. I grew up watching the guy. it was more funny to me than anything. And hey, anytime you can get on a hockey night in Canada, I'll take it.
Yeah, I would imagine. Now, you were pretty undersized, especially going into junior and during your junior career. Like when you started getting to the point in the National Hockey League where you were actually winning fights and so on, how big were you then? Like, what did you get to?
Well, when you started saying I was undersized, I was like, oh, fuck. You talk to my teammates in the shower or my wife. Thank God you went back to the fighting part of it. Hey, I could talk about being undersized off the ice. That wasn't in the book, the undersized in the shower.
Okay, that's not what I meant, but
okay.
That was a good one, though.
Just clarifying. I grew really late. So in Bantam and midget, I was like 5'2", 112 pounds. Like I was super small. So when I was in junior, I was 148, then 160. My first couple of years in the NHL, I went from like 165 to 178. And I'd say I played 85% of my career at about 188 pounds, which still isn't that big, 188 to 192. And I remember Doug McKinney, our fitness trainer, after like the second year, he's like, we got to bulk you up. The guys you're fighting are 230, 240. You're just giving up way too much strength and weight. So I got up to like 206 creatine. I had a neck like Brock Lesnar. I was Hulk Hogan walking in. I still had skinny legs. I mean, I still had legs that looked like that. SNL, skinny legs, or SLN, skinny leg syndrome. So I literally worked out so hard. And after a week, I'm like, I can't skate. I mean, I am slow. I am terrible. I'm like, I can't do this. So I went to him. I dropped the weight, went to like 192 and felt much better. Now, if you look at my career stats, when I played in Buffalo, I had Rob Ray and Brad May. They were the tough guys. Now, would I fight Stu Grimson or Ty Domi? Yeah, I would, but I didn't have to fight them. And there's a big difference when you go to Pittsburgh or Tampa Bay and you're the only guy. Now you have to fight them. And there's a different mindset that goes on, because when I played in Buffalo, I didn't worry about having to fight the toughest guy on the other team. I might have fought him during the game, but there's a different mindset of knowing you have to, as opposed to having to fight them or willing to fight them. And I think that's, I have to pay respect to Brad May, Rob Ray. And then in New York, I had good numbers. I had Steve McKenna, Christoph Olawa, Sandy McCarthy, Dale Puritan. I went to Colorado for a small period of time. We had Peter Worrell and Bob Bugner and Jim Cummins. So when I had that protection around me, man, it was fun to fight guys 185 to 195 pounds. And now I felt like the heavyweight with these guys because I was so used to fighting the guys 230, 240, 250.
So,
well, it's funny. I kind of was the opposite. I did a lot of fighting in junior and then in the WHA and my first, 3 years in the NHL, because I wanted everybody to realize that I'm not going to be intimidated. And that's the reason I did it, right? And then Mike Nicola comes up to me the one year he's coaching us, and he says, Rick, we can't have you fighting. We need you on the ice, not in the penalty box. But I still had a couple of 100 minutes in penalties anyway. So,
yeah, I remember Mess and Leachy one night in New York saying, "Hey, man, you can play this game. You don't have to fight every night. Don't fight that guy." I can't remember who it was on the other team. It might have been like Eric Cairns. He's like, "Don't fight him. Like, we need you on the ice." Like, third shift in, I fight him. I get the shit kicked out of me. And I've never seen two guys so mad at me. And they're like, we know you're tough, man. Like, we know you're willing to do it. We want you on your team. We also don't want you to get killed. We'd like to have a beer after the game with you. Like, don't be an idiot.
Well, okay, just along those lines, Barney, there comes a point, like, where me, the fans and the listeners, and we all look and you hear about the booing and the verbal shots and the cheap shots and, maybe thinking, is this all really worth it? You used a wrestling term, and I think the term is the heel, the one who's always the bad guy in wrestling. I mean, it takes real hard work and a strong character to endure that. Now, in your case, when you got to that point in your career, maybe even going back to junior, was there a point, actually, is probably a better way to put it, where you crossed that line and you knew there's no turning back, that I got to play like this forever?
Yeah, honestly, it was after the first 2 weeks in the Quebec League. It really was. I went from probably not making it to having fans. I was the only English speaking guy in the team in predominantly, and when I say predominantly, 99% Quebec speaking place in Quebec City back in the late 80s, 89 through 92. It was French. And all of a sudden you go from being a borderline guy to one of the most popular players on the team, if not the most popular player. And you see your jerseys in the stands, you see them chanting your name. You're like, the girls are liking me. I'm playing a lot. There's a correlation. This is not going to change. Everyone likes to be admired. Everyone likes to be appreciated. So I found a recipe that worked for me for success, and I was never, ever going back. And I look back now, could I have had maybe 500 points and had 1,000 less penalty minutes? Maybe. Would I have been as effective? Maybe. I'm not sure. Would I had less headaches now? Absolutely. 100%. But I had a recipe. I felt appreciated. I found a niche, and it had a track record for working, and I was never going to let that go. That was always going to be the foundation. And going back to your point, is there nights that it's really hard? Yeah, especially in the eras that we played in, the 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, it was the wild, wild west back then, man. Like playing the way that I did, and people did, and even Rick being a scorer. You have a bullseye on you. You know, guys want to break his wrist so he can't score a goal. Guys want to break my face, and you had to answer the bell. And if you didn't answer the bell, they didn't wait for the bell to even ring half the time. They were coming off the top rope. They didn't care. And the league didn't put a stop to it. So now, listen, I'd love to be Brad Marchand, or I'd love to be Matthew Barnaby in today's age. I'd have to skate a little better, but we work on that. To be able to play and be a rat and fight 4 or 5 times a year and still get under people's skin and have the league protect you and not have super heavyweights coming after you. Oh man, this would be a dream come true to play in today's NHL. So I think having that bullseye on your back every single day, like Squid did as well, that was probably the hardest part.
Squid?
Yeah, it's funny. When you mentioned you had psychologists and everything, and I'm thinking, I'm going, wait a minute. No, Harold Ballard was our psychologist. You did whatever the hell he wanted you to do, and that was it. And you didn't cross the line. You didn't try to go against him, because Harold was Harold, and he held the pen and the checkbook. And if you went against them, you were out of there pretty quickly.
My joke to my psychologist on our Rangers, Dr. Kimberly, she was awesome. She was with us for 3 years, and every time I'd meet with her, she's like, "How you feeling?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm good. I wish our team was doing a little better." I go, "Doc, I'm just full disclosure here. Like, I don't need a psychologist. I need a psychiatrist. I need someone that can prescribe me something. I have some tough days here. I need someone that can prescribe. You can't prescribe anything."
Well, you know what? Now, here's a question for both you guys. So, and Barney, I'll start with you. So, playing the way you play and talking about the Wild West in the 70s and 80s, how would you respond if somebody pulled a Michigan on your team?
Wow. Yeah. It's funny because our kids play against each other in the East Coast League, Viver's kid and my kid. And you see it a lot now in every single league. Here's what I say. I'd rather in today's NHL, someone do it in the NHL. I don't know if I'd like to do it in the East Coast League and have, "Hey, where's my coffee?" And, you know, as opposed to the East Coast League. Because there's not as many cameras. And I'd say if someone did the Michigan against one of us, I mean, you're getting clothesline, man. It would have been off the charts. Having said that, I absolutely love it. I love Trevor Zegras. I love seeing the kids. It's not even a cocky move anymore. It's actually the best play to score from behind the net. It's hard to take the puck from behind the net and do a wraparound. Whereas to pick it up, it takes half the amount of time. So where it was a cocky move, I don't even think it's a cocky move anymore. It's actually just part of everyone's arsenal, and the skill that these guys have is just unparalleled, and it's just going to keep going to the next level.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And well, first of all, I could never put my stick and pick the puck up behind the net or anywhere on the ice for that matter. So that wouldn't have worked for me. But I go back and I think about like Hextall and Billy Smith in goal, and someone trying to pull the Michigan on them. Like, I mean, it would be full on two-hander, across the arm or something, and broken arm. Oh, well, I won't be doing any Michigans for a while.
Two things. You used a stick that was 314 pounds. So,
well, that's true.
That 2x4 would have been tough. I look at old hockey cards when I come in, and I'm using the Sherwood and the wood stick, and my son will always laugh. I'm using like the Bauer 100s that weighed like so much weight, especially when they got wet. But yeah, it might have happened once with Billy Smith, once with Ron Hextall, and I guarantee no one would have ever tried it again. That move would have been done.
Yeah. Now, Barney, you've always been known for being a good chirper and being stirring it up on the ice. Now, when attacking a player verbally, is there a code you live by that you wouldn't cross?
You know what? I crossed it. I think once. Now, my crossing the line is definitely different from other people's crossing the line, right? We all have a threshold that we live by. So my gauge is definitely a lot different than anyone else's. One time in Hershey, I said something to Dan Kordick about John Kordick, who had passed away, and it's the only time I've ever apologized for a chirp, and it was wrong. I was over the line, and he went fucking wild. I mean, he went wild. I've told guys about banging their girls when they played junior, and they were true. And then sometimes I'd say it when it wasn't true, just to try to stir up a fight at home later or get their teammates laughing at him on the ice. They were like, "Oh, did you?" I'm like, "No, not a chance. I don't even know the girl, but I saw her in the lobby with like his jersey on." I'd be like, "Yeah, your wife's that blonde, eh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, she was great, like in junior or when you guys broke up or right before, like just something." Or if a girl was from Buffalo when I knew her, like I just throw it out there just to try to stir it up and get him pissed off. But some of my favorite ones were with like Ken Hitchcock, like going by the bench and he'd scream at me, "Barnaby, you're a fucking pussy. You won't fight him. You won't fight this." And I'd be like, I'd grab the skin right underneath, and Ken's a little heavier dude, and I just start making the gobbling sounds. But Ken's looking out over the ice, and it's loud, and all his players are laughing, and they're got their heads down, and I'd be like, "Ken, you got something on your chin," and he'd look. I'm like, "Nah, the third one, the one way down here." But my favorite line, and probably it doesn't go over the line, but probably like. I look at it now because I'm like, this guy was so nice. Kenny Johnson, he played for the New York Islanders, first rounder, great player, didn't say shit with a mouthful. And he came by our bench and he had the worst acne. He had the acne with the white in it. Like he had the zit poppers from that you could, if he squeezed a zit, you're getting hit in the 14th row. And he came by our bench in Long Island, and I just remembered yelling, "Hey, Kenny!" And he looked over. And I go, "In North America, we eat the pizza. We don't sleep in it." And he just looked at me. He didn't do anything. He's like, "What an asshole!" Like, and I looked down. I go, "I don't know if I got him, but everyone's laughing on our bench." I'm like, I kind of feel like an asshole now.
Now, Barney, one story that you told us last time that Squid and I were howling about it after was, and it didn't make the book, is when you were chirping a player in the playoffs about a girl. And saying you were going to tell his wife, and all of a sudden, why don't you tell that story? Because I think that's just an absolute classic.
That was a gem.
It's because I got to know the guy after, and I didn't want to use his name, and I didn't think the story was as funny. Like it's funny, but I didn't want to use the name, and it might have just. But I like the guy a lot now, like a lot. He's one of my really good friends. He is divorced, by the way, so it should have got in the book. But he's got kids, so we're playing in Philadelphia. I can mention that, and we're the whole playoff long. I'm like, "I know your girlfriend. I know your girlfriend. I'm going to tell your wife after one of these games. I'm going to tell your wife. And this guy's fucking rattled. Like, this guy's rattled. His girlfriend was in Montreal, and he's rattled, and he's not doing anything to me. He's like fucking, not that he's tough, but he's not saying anything. And after the playoff, we're shaking hands. He's like, how did you know about this Jose? And I was like, I'm seeing her friend.
Oh man, that is
yeah.
Well,
Now,
first of all, what are the chances that you know this because you were with her friend? I mean, what are the chances of that happening in the National Hockey League? Like, that's pretty rare.
In Montreal, it's not that rare.
Well, that's true. It's one. Yeah, okay.
and any other city, but Montreal, it's not that rare.
Now, what about
I gotta
coming back
agree
at
with
you?
There.
Hey, what about coming back at you? What are some of the best lines that come back at you of players? And if somebody crossed the line with you, let's put it this way, then did you go back at him and go harder?
No one's like, everyone's always yelled shit, but no one ever like. I never allowed myself. I always loved the verbal confrontations because I knew it was my job, and the people that were yelling back at me, it wasn't part of their arsenal. I knew it was getting them off their game if they're verbally chirping at me, especially some good players. If Lindros, I'm like, I got him. If he's yelling at me the whole game, I got him. So they're all gonna yell, "You're a pussy," this and that, whatever. No one ever got me. Like, I was like, I loved it, and I just would go harder and harder. The only guy that got me was Chris Simon, and it was awesome, man. It was awesome because Chris is a tough guy, and I was yelling something nasty about his family and his mom and his sisters. I think you can imagine back in the era where we're going, and literally he just looks at me. He's like, "How's your dad?" And I was like, "Oh, motherfucker." You got me good. I don't even have a response. And we both went to the penalty box. And I'm like, fuck. All he said was a few words, and he got me. I'm like, how does he know about this? Because there's no social media. No one had written a book. No, I hadn't come out and done a memoir yet. We had the same agent. I remember calling my agent, Larry Kelly, after, and I'm like, did you tell him? Like, how the hell? He goes, I swear I would never, ever, ever say anything like that. So I don't know how he got it. I never even asked him because we played together in New York. Great guy. But man, he was the only, he stopped me. He stopped me cold. He stopped me cold. That was very well thought out. However he found out, I can applaud it. Very well done.
So for the viewership out there that are going to read the book, what is something about Matthew Barnaby they're going to be surprised at when they read your Unfiltered?
That I wrote a book. That's going to be the most surprising thing.
Well, besides that,
got my grade in 11.5, and I wrote a book. So that's impressive.
Well, you got a half of grade 11 more than I do.
I think a lot of people in our areas are in that.
I wasn't far behind either of you, by the way.
Yeah, I think when people read the book, I think it's funny. I think there's just there's stories that are so crazy. I think people hopefully can just at the end just think I'm a good guy, and that's kind of what I try to be is every day is a good person to the people around me, a good father, that my kids mean more than me than anything in this world. And as much as I love playing the game, I love my family as much as anything. And as a human, you make mistakes, and it's not how you get knocked down, it's how you get back up. And for maybe people that didn't know my story, listen, you can accomplish anything you want. It doesn't mean if you're the least talented person in the world, you're going to make the NHL. And that's you have to be in the right place at the right time. But you can accomplish a lot of things in life if you just really buckle down. And if you really put your mind to it, you can do it. And if it wasn't through the NHL, I know I would have done something else. And just because I love to prove people wrong, and a lot of people doubted me at a young age. And I still, at 49 years old, one of my mottos is PPW, prove people wrong. And my wife's like, why don't you like prove yourself right? It doesn't always have to be proving people wrong. It can be prove yourself right. If you believe you can do something, just do it. Do it. But set your mind to it and work hard at it, because to accomplish anything in any realm, the one constant has to be hard work. People will say it's lucky. And I used to say, man, I'm lucky that I got to play in the NHL for 14 years. Man, I'm lucky I have a good life, and I get to do alumni events and people ask for your autograph. And man, I wrote a book. I'm lucky. It's like, yeah, you're fortunate, but you're not lucky. You worked hard, and anyone that's had success at any level has worked really hard. So that's something I'm actually proud of, and kind of the narrative that I've changed over the years.
Yep, that's well said.
So Barney, when you're going through this process, was there any particular thing or two that you thought maybe I shouldn't put this in the book, or was it just like, no, we're gonna, let everybody know everything?
No, not a bit. It's never. You've heard me speak in public. It's just not. There wasn't. Again, my object wasn't to ruin marriages or send people to prison. And we both have stories that probably could do both of those things.
Probably.
But yeah. But yes, 100% unequivocally is probably the better way to phrase that. Everything, I'm transparent. People in the book. I didn't like Dominic Hasek. Now he's the best goaltender that's ever played, in my opinion. I played with Dom. I played against Brodeur. I played against Patrick Waugh, and I got to play with Dominic Hasek, and I saw what he did for 7 years with our team. He turned a very average, hardworking team into a very good team, and it was because of our goaltending. We worked hard, but without him, we don't do it. I didn't like him off the ice. I didn't like the person that he was when we played. I think he's a lot better now. I think he's got older and had time to reflect on the person that he was. And I hope in the small meetings that I've had with him, but I even saw him a couple weeks ago. And I go, he's like, Dom, and he's like, he picked up the book. He's like, am I in it? I go, oh yeah, you're in it, bud. You're in it a lot. You're in it a lot. And the one thing, and this is who I am as a person, is at the Hall of Fame, his agent, Rich Winter, sent me a message asking if I'd like to attend the Hall of Fame ceremonies for Dom. And my email back was very short. I hate Dom, right? And that was, I didn't go to the ceremonies.
Well, another guy you talk about, I don't want to give too much away in the book because the stories are good and you go into some good detail, Dominic. And I thought you're very fair with your comments, by the way. Tom Barrasso, another goalie, another oddball. Just, without giving away too much again, a couple of the stories on him. You guys got him one night on a prank on a bottle of wine.
Yeah. First, when I first got a trade there, I like shelved one. I got traded for Stu Barnes, and Tommy's just he's a cocky American goalie, and he was a damn good one coming into the league. He was a Calder Trophy, came out of high school, went to Buffalo, first rounder. Man, was he good. Then he won cups with Pittsburgh, with Mario and Yager. And, first time I come down, one of the first days he comes in a different Ferrari every day. I'm like, hey, Tommy, what kind of Ferrari was that? He's like, kid, don't worry about it. You'll never be able to afford one. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. All right, just jump in my pickup. Here I go. But then one day I shoot the puck like over his shoulder. This is like 2 weeks into my tenure with the Penguins. And I start celebrating and hands up and everything, high five. And he comes storming out of the crease. And he's like yelling at me. This is practice. Like, what the hell is he doing? He's like, how many cups you win? I'm like, none. He's like, that's right. How many Hart trophies you win? I'm like, again, none. He's like, that's right. He goes, 66 and 68 are the only ones that shoot high on me. I'm like, okay. Skate back to that. I look over at Yager. I'm like, is this guy for fucking real? Like, I'm not allowed to shoot high. He goes, yeah, he doesn't really like you shooting high. And he doesn't go down in practice. No. So you got to keep it like a foot off the ground. But yeah, one night we were on the road, and Tommy pleats his jeans. Okay. He gets his jeans dry cleaned with a pleat in them with that, like every day folded. We're all hanging on there. They haven't been washed in 2 weeks. And we get him with an expensive bottle. That's a cheap bottle, and he's sifting it, smelling it. I'm like, Tommy, how do you know it's the real good? He's like, yeah, you can just taste it. You can just taste it. And then we're like, we know it's like a $18 bottle. He thinks it's like a $200 bottle, but he's playing it up because he's the man, right? So he's playing it up. In the end, we were the ones with the last laugh because now we know he's bullshitting us. He can't tell the difference between a $120 bottle of wine or an $18 bottle of wine.
Funny his name comes up because I remember when I got to Buffalo, he had already been traded. And I heard so many goddamn stories about him. It was like, and exactly what you said. He was your typical cocky American.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody said. It was like, but the stories I heard were remarkable.
Barney, I want to ask you a couple things. We're getting close to our time here, and again, a lot of this is covered in the book, but just touch on some of the coaches that you played with: Ted Nolan, Muckler, even Herb Brooks and Torts.
Yeah, Mucks gave me a chance, right? Old school and demanded a lot, but he was fair. And again, different era. And you really for a young guy that wasn't a superstar. It was really the superstars and then your role players, and you got to fall in line and you got to find a niche and just shut your mouth. And that's kind of that era. But I love Mucks. I love Mucks as a coach, and then as a GM. We had our battles and contract negotiations. God rest his soul. Just a great man, great hockey man, a lifer in the game. Then I went to Ted Nolan. Ted Nolan, with Ted Nolan was kind of like my junior coach. He gave me a role, found a role, made me an everyday NHLer, and appreciated my style. Appreciated I was willing to do anything to play in the National Hockey League. And a lot of people say they are, like I said, a lot of people say they're willing to do anything to play in the NHL. And a lot of people, it's just words. Are you willing to do anything? Because that encompasses a lot along the way. And if you're truly willing to do anything, watch out, because you might have a tough life doing it, and people just frankly are not. I know so many people that have more talent that should have played in the NHL if they wanted to do the role that I did. In fact, they didn't want to do that. But Teddy was just a very honest, appreciated hard work, and was always going to take hard work over talent. And if you had talent and hard work, man, did he love you then? He really loved you. But he was.
Well, that was a style he played.
Yeah,
Teddy. I mean, he was a decent hockey player. I mean, he wasn't a bad player or anything, but he embodied that hard work and do whatever you need to do to stay in the National Hockey League, and that's the way he played.
And that's his upbringing, right? He came from a small family and tough upbringing. So we really embodied, like you said, Squid, Teddy's personality. Our team embodied that, and we had success. Then I go to Pittsburgh, and I had Kevin Constantine. He's a douchebag. I cover that in the book. Bad, great X's and O's guy, absolute douchebag of a guy. So that makes it a bad coach for me. Then it enters Herb Brooks. Not a great NHL coach, miracle on ice. He was, I never knew anything about the 80s team. I was Canadian. We didn't send our NHLers, so I didn't care about the Olympics. It didn't mean anything to me. It was more about the Canada Cups then and all that kind of stuff that came after 80 that I hung my hat on. So I didn't know a lot about Herb when I crossed into there. Obviously, once I'd spent 9 years in the National Hockey League, I'd heard about the 80s and Mike Ruzioni and that whole team and the movie, everything to go along with it. But Herb was just a great guy. He was more of a college coach, but he was just a great human being, and I can appreciate that. He was never going to have a long tenure in the National Hockey League as a coach, because that shit doesn't work in the NHL, what you try to pull with a miracle on ice, especially with the likes of Jaromir Jagr and a lot of European players on our team. He's going to be gone before they are. But as a person, God rest his soul as well, who's passed away, just a tremendous human being. And I'll end it with John Tortorella. You asked. He's a great guy away from the rink. At the rink, he wears on you, man. He's just tough. And I'm not for everyone as a player. I might not be everyone as a person or a personality or the way that I play. He one thing I can say, he was very honest with me. I signed a 3-year contract, and he came up to me as we were skating around one morning skate, and I was playing like 6 minutes a night. Of course, I'm not going to have success, and I'm fighting the heavyweight every single night. And he says, I just don't think you skate well enough to play in the NHL. I'm like, why the fuck did you guys just give me $4.5 million and you don't think I can play in the league? Like, are you guys fucking stupid? Like, so stupid. So he's like, I'm like, do you, is it okay if I go and ask for a trade? Because I want to play. Like, now I have the money. I have my contract, but I don't want to sit on the bench. I know it's Florida, but I'm a proud guy. I want to be I want to win a Stanley Cup, and I want to be a part of something. And he's like, yep. So I went up, and I was traded probably a week later. I don't know the exact timeline on it. Went to New York. One of our first games, I score a goal against Torts and come right by the bench and kind of give him the fuck you, the pumpernickel, and fuck you. And I had 3 of my best years in New York after they traded me. Now, they went on 3 years later to win a Stanley Cup. I'm just glad it wasn't like that year. Then I would have been like, hey, he's probably right. I can't play in this fucking league.
Great final thought. Hey, Squid.
Oh, no, I love you when people bring up Torts, because I had him in a completely different role. He was an assistant coach in Buffalo when I was there. So, the assistants aren't that vocal. They don't say a whole lot. And Torts was pretty quiet. Rick Dudley was our coach, who was a fiery guy. And Torts was kind of the guy that would settle everything down after Rick came in and tore things apart. And he did several times. But you know what? You're right about Torts. So away from the rink, he's a wonderful person, and he cares about people.
Yeah. And
he does a lot of charity stuff. But those guys, Brophy was the same way. Away from the rink, Mike Keenan was the same way. But get him in the rink, and they turn into a completely different individual.
Torts says himself he likes dogs more than people. And Squid, I have a question for you. When the rants with Duds ever went like really wild, did the thing on top of his head ever like just get to the side or something? Did the meowing cat ever get off?
You know what? We never saw that happen, and it's probably a good goddamn thing we didn't, because he would never have heard the end of it. But I can tell you, one night in the yard, he was going so crazy, and he was banging on the glass behind the bench, and the glass in the yard would just like bend over. And the fans are running out of their seats or getting the hell out of there because they didn't want to get killed.
Oh, yeah. I know. He is wild. When he was our GM in Tampa when I first got there, and I'd get to the rink. I'm always the first guy at the rink on any team. And I walk in, he's got the shirt off, and he's just pow.
Yeah.
Bench pressing. And he's like, you want to get in a set? I'm like, hell no. I lift about like a quarter of what you're lifting, and you're 30 years older than me, man. Not a chance.
Well, Barney, I mean, the time just flies by, and anybody listening, you can tell that the stories are just flowing. We've just basically scratched the surface on this book. It's Unfiltered by Matthew Barnaby. Excellent read. Highly recommend. Great Christmas gift. Great read overall. Great job on it, Barney, and thanks for joining us today, and best of luck with the book.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, you can go to Amazon. Jeffrey Bezos, my wife, he comes daily to the door with something. So if you need Jeffrey Bezos, he will come through. So Amazon, anyone that wants a signed copy can literally just email me at barnabymatthew@yahoo.com, and I can sign those and get them before Christmas. Indigo should have them in all the stores, and in the States, Barnes & Noble has them. Guys, I really appreciate it as well, and promoting the book. It was a lot of fun to write. Always fun coming on with you guys. Keep up the awesome job, and have a safe holiday season.
Great.
Well, you too, Barney. And I got to say that I loved reading it. It's not easy to do. I did it, and there's things that are uncomfortable about talking about, but good for you that you went ahead and did that. That's fantastic.
It's not as uncomfortable as masturbating with sandpaper, so we're all good.
Well, I never tried it, so I wouldn't know.
Don't do it. Hey, you asked for a tip. Here's your tip of the day.
Okay. Thanks, Barney.
All right, Barney.
Hey,